A lot of superhero movies treat heroism like a matter of athleticism or ego. Spider-Man 2 approaches it with a very different lens. The film frames heroism as a calling that takes more from Peter than it gives. Every part of his daily life erodes because he keeps showing up for the people who need him. His grades fall even though he tries to stay focused in class. His job at the pizzeria slips through his fingers because he runs off to stop crimes that nobody will ever thank him for. In fact, it's pretty much expected of Spider-Man at this point. His friendships strain under the weight of missed plans and half-truths. His relationship with Mary Jane Watson completely falls apart because he cannot give her the consistency and openness that she deserves. The movie never tries to hide how much he actually loses. It gives him no reward for being Spider-Man, and it presents the mask as a heavy burden that protects others but ultimately isolates him from truly living the life that he wants to live. Looking at this from a theological perspective, Peter Parker lives inside a tension that was described in Romans, where St. Paul talks about wanting to do good while feeling the pain that comes from living it out. The film captures that exact internal battle that was presented in the Bible. Peter wants a normal life, but every time he steps away from his responsibilities, he witnesses a moment of danger that drags him right back. His desire to quit Spider-Man functions as a biblical temptation to abandon a calling because its weight feels unfair. The movie treats that temptation with actual sincerity rather than dismissiveness. You completely understand why he would want to abandon the mantle of Spider-Man. In fact, I think most people would find it to be a completely reasonable decision. The film constantly shows him hitting emotional and physical exhaustion. It places him at the exact point where any normal person would choose comfort, and then it asks what kind of person keeps going when the cost refuses to let up. By doing this, the film respects the difficulty of selflessness because it presents it as something easy to admire from a distance and painful to sustain in practice. This idea resonates, intentionally or not, with Catholic teaching because vocation has always been tied to sacrifice. A calling does not exist to elevate the person who receives it. It exists to direct that person towards service. Peter embodies that through his constant willingness to help others, even when it destroys the stability he tries to build. He answers alarms, he all but cries for help at doctor's appointments, and he drops everything to address sudden dangers without pausing to consider what it will cost him personally. He understands that his abilities give him a responsibility that no one else can fulfill in the same way, and the film treats that responsibility with the seriousness of a spiritual burden. It becomes the cross that he carries, not in the sense of martyrdom or spectacle, but through the quiet erosion of his own personal comfort. Peter stays in the fight because he knows the suffering he prevents is real, and it's that choice that defines him far more than the powers he possesses. The film recognizes that heroism grows from perseverance, and it uses Peter's sacrifices to show how a calling shapes a person's entire life. Ultimately, the movie keeps returning to the question of what kind of life Peter wants to live and what kind of life he feels called to live. He keeps trying to hold on to something normal, whether it's a steady job or a chance at academic success or a relationship with Mary Jane, something that feels simple and honest. But each attempt slips away because the moment he hears a cry for help, he moves toward it without even thinking. At one point, the film shows him sprinting into a burning apartment to rescue a child, with no guarantee he'll even make it out alive, since at this point, he doesn't even have any powers. Throughout the film, we see him chasing down criminals across alleys and rooftops, while his own life falls apart behind him. Each act of service pulls him farther away from the stability he tries to build. The story never frames these losses as mistakes. Instead, it treats them as the natural consequence of a life that is defined by responsibility. Peter gives more than he receives, and the world around him continues spinning forward without pausing to appreciate the sacrifices that he makes. This tension reflects a gospel story that has shaped Christian moral thought for centuries. The rich young man approaches Jesus wanting a righteous life, yet he cannot release what makes him comfortable. He desires holiness, but steps back when he realizes the cost, which is all of his earthly possessions and desire. Peter Parker stands in front of the same split in the road. One direction offers steady friendships, a clear future, and Mary Jane's love. It promises safety and the relief that comes from not carrying the weight of an entire city, while the other direction offers exhaustion and isolation. It strips him of convenience and forces him to confront danger every time he puts on the suit. Peter chooses the harder path because he knows the consequences of ignoring suffering. The film shows him accepting that burden with a sense of quiet duty rather than grandeur. He looks at the needs of others and moves toward them because he understands what his absence would cost. By grounding Peter's choices in these moments, the film expresses a spiritual truth through superhero logic. Holiness is not an abstract ideal, but something that is inherently lived through action. A calling requires movement toward the people who need help, even when that movement disrupts the life someone wants for themselves. I think Peter's sacrifices reveal a person who understands that goodness becomes real when it changes how someone behaves. The film presents his decisions not as supernatural destiny, but as the lived reality of someone who refuses to look away from suffering, and in doing so, it highlights the humanity at the center of his heroism and the moral clarity that shapes his path. The train scene stands as the most deliberate use of Catholic imagery in the entire film. Everything in that sequence builds toward a visual expression of sacrifice. Peter finds himself responsible for the lives of hundreds of people as the runaway train barrels through a city with no brakes. The film does not treat this as a moment of spectacle alone, but rather it shows him searching for a solution with urgency, realizing that the only barrier between the passengers and catastrophe will be his own body. Up until this point, he has sacrificed literally everything, and now he must give even more for the good of humanity. So he positions himself between two extremes, planting his feet on the face of the speeding train and anchoring his webbing across the buildings to slow it down. It shows a person who obeys an instinct to protect life even when the solution demands suffering. As the train drags him forward, the camera lingers on the strain running through his body. His arms pull outward, stretching toward the edges of the frame. His chest rises with effort. His face tightens under the pressure of a force meant to crush him. The posture mirrors traditional images of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It is not subtle because it is not meant to be subtle. It's a Spider-Man movie. The stretched arms, the physical torment, and the commitment to save those who cannot save themselves paints a picture of sacrificial love on a biblical level. As a result, the audience implicitly understands the meaning without needing it explained. The visual language communicates everything, and Peter becomes a figure whose pain holds back disaster. When the train finally halts and Peter collapses, the film shifts from tension to reverence. The passengers step forward and lift his limp body with a gentleness that contrasts with the chaos that came before it. They carry him through the cabin with a care that resembles a group preparing a body for rest. The filmmakers understand the symbolic weight of these images. They allow the scene to breathe, so the audience can see how vulnerable Peter becomes in this very moment. His mask is gone. His identity is exposed, yet he does not shield himself or hide. He trusts the people he saved, and they respond with empathy rather than judgment. The passengers look at him with sincere gratitude. They see him as a young man who put everything on the line for them. Their promise to keep his identity secret comes from a collective understanding of what he risked. It is not a transactional agreement. They don't benefit from it. If anything, they could easily expose Spider-Man's true identity and profit monetarily from this entire incident. Instead, they acknowledge that his sacrifice deserves respect, no matter what. In showing this, the scene becomes a meditation on compassion. It reveals how communities form around shared moments of crisis and how acts of service can inspire gentleness in others. The moment honors the idea that a person who gives everything for strangers can still be treated with dignity. It frames heroism as an act of self-offering that draws out the humanity of those who witness it. Now let's move away from Peter, the film's protagonist, and onto the other side of the spectrum, our antagonist, Dr. Otto Octavius, who begins the story as a man defined by brilliance and ambition. His intellect sets him apart, and the film presents him as someone who believes deeply in the value of his own vision. Throughout the film, he lives and dies by the line, "Intelligence is not a privilege, it's a gift, and you use it for the good of mankind." The fusion experiment he develops is rooted in the desire to create something revolutionary and beneficial to mankind. Yet, his confidence carries a subtle flaw. He refuses to acknowledge the weakness in his design and overlooks the warnings of others. The film shows this not to diminish his intelligence, but to reveal the danger of unchecked pride. When the reactor destabilizes, Otto's refusal to accept limitation becomes the catalyst that brings everything crashing down. The mechanical arms built to obey his thoughts become a physical extension of that pride. They feed impulses he can no longer control, driving him toward destruction and isolating him from the compassion he once shared with people like his wife and Peter Parker. His story falls into the long tradition of tragic characters whose gifts are twisted by arrogance. Pride severs his relationships and transforms a pursuit meant for good into a threat capable of consuming an entire city, maybe even the world. The film distinguishes itself in how it completes Otto's arc. Instead of outright framing him as a villain destined for punishment, it builds towards the possibility of restoration and redemption. Peter confronts him not with rage, but with a plea that reaches back to the man he admired. The moment becomes a turning point because it cuts through the noise that controls Otto's mind. Peter reminds him of his responsibility and the goodness that shaped his work before everything went wrong. The film understands that redemption often begins with recognition. Otto hears Peter's words and allows them to break through the corruption that has overwhelmed him. He reclaims his conscience with a clarity that surprises even himself. The reality brings sorrow because he finally sees the damage that his actions have caused, yet it also brings resolve. He chooses to correct what he has broken, even though the correction will demand his life. His final line, "I will not die a monster," captures the essence of redemption. A person can fall into darkness yet still choose the light when confronted with truth. Otto's decision reflects the reality that redemption is not passive. It comes from deliberate action and a willingness to accept responsibility. His sacrifice restores the order he disrupted. The collapsing fusion reactor becomes the instrument of his reconciliation with the world that he endangered. His death does not land as punishment, but as an act of moral clarity. He dies in pursuit of the good he once sought as a scientist. The moment carries the solemn beauty of a wrong made right through self-giving. By closing Otto's story this way, the film aligns his journey with Peter's. Both men choose to protect others at great personal cost. Peter lives that decision throughout the film, and Otto discovers it in his final moments. Their choices connect them through a shared understanding of responsibility. And the ending carries a sense of grace because it shows that a fall does not define a person's last act. Otto's redemption gives the film emotional weight that extends beyond its superhero framework. It affirms the belief that sacrificial love has the power to restore what pride destroys. It brings the story to an end that feels honest, human, and spiritually resonant. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick, you're watching Firewood Media. If you like Catholic analysis video essays just like this, I highly recommend you check out my video on Nacho Libre being peak Catholic representation, or my video on The Exorcist being one of the best Catholic films ever made. It's very misunderstood. Trust me, I know it sounds crazy, but it is a Catholic movie through and through. I know this is a little bit of a departure from my usual content. I think after I'm done with some of the Godzilla stuff, I really want to move into more of this kind of Catholic analysis. I think it really opens the doors to interpreting movies in a very different way than what you might normally find on YouTube. So who knows, this might be a more consistent series on the channel. Big thank you to channel members. Your names are listed right up here on screen. It's because of you that I can make videos like this. So if you want to be a member, it's $1.99 a month. You can see select videos early. There are some members only videos that are exclusive to channel members. A whole plethora of live streams and VODs that are all members only. So I highly recommend you check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.